Howdy. I was actually asked to talk about what I think, not what I necessarily know, but what I think, and what climatologists as a whole, especially in the Western U.S., are thinking about these days. And I'm going to have fun telling this story. The green. So who are we climatologists? And this is only the sector of climatologists. These are most of the state climatologists when we gathered at a meeting in, where were we? We were on that's the Columbia River and the Columbia River Gorge in the background. This was 2 years ago. I missed the meeting last year, which was in Cape May. If any of you want a really good time, come to this summer's state climatologist meeting. We'll be in Santa Fe in the last week of June. John, you should be there. You should. And what do you see about these climatologists? Most of them look a bit like me, like with some gray hair. Most of them are male. There's a few, I see a few women there. I see a couple people of color, but not very many. That's what the state climatologists look like right now. What's interesting is we all love what we do, and we all love the climate. Most every state has a state climatologist. You'll see Tennessee is without a state climatologist and has been for about 15 years. Massachusetts had the same state climatologist for 50 years, and they have not yet replaced that position. Rhode Island is also without a state climatologist. The light blue colors are ones where the programs aren't super active but ramping up. Do you know that state climatologists are not new? Do you know that we sort of had our first state climatologist in the 1880s down at Colorado College when they were first organizing the Colorado State Weather Service? And who was the representative from Colorado Agricultural College? It was Elwood Mead. And so this has been going on for some time, and already by 1890 we had a relatively robust observing network, because that was what the climatologists early on wanted to do. We wanted data. Give us data and we shall tell you stories. Our primary role was and still is to monitor our lovely climate of our respective states, to maintain good quality data, and to then provide from that data useful information to people like you. Yes. We are also asked to look ahead, around the corner, see what's coming ahead, and how we traditionally did that was by being students of what had happened in the past, so that we had an idea of what was most likely from the statistical properties of our observations to tell us what was going to happen next. I love this report that was put together by Robert Trimble at the Colorado Agricultural College. After working about 30 years, they put together this great report, and in it, and I don't think maybe a few of you are close enough to the screen to read it, they're already in 1918 talking about climate change. And at that point, based on the data available at that time in Colorado and elsewhere, by 1918 we had about 30 years of data to work with. And he's saying it doesn't look like this wet trend is real. And what was that wet trend? That was still the rain following the plow idea that had been put forth probably as a publicity scheme more than anything else to get people to move west. But there it was. Now with a few more years of data, that's Rocky Ford, where we have a beautiful 127-year record, and you see the ups and downs and all arounds. You see that precipitation, which you all seem to care about for what you do for a living, it's variable. What we learned 30 years ago is still true today. It keeps going up and down. And can you see from those ups and downs, can you see those clear, easy to use cycles that you can use to predict what's going to happen next year? A little shaky. All right. I'm now going to take you to when I was in college, early 1970s, really wanting hard to be a climatologist. Technology in the field of atmospheric science was exploding. But there were no jobs for climatologists. There were jobs for people involved in satellite meteorology. It was erupting, numerical weather prediction expanding, air pollution meteorology because of the recent passage of the Clean Air Act was mushrooming. Climatology was going. The world in the early 70s appeared to be cooling. I think I have a graph. Sunspots were thought to be the driver of all drought cycles. There was the U.S. average annual temperature trend as observed when I started college in 1970 and 71 and 72. It did look like it was going down. The next ice age was anticipated to be heading towards the United States. Yes, get ready. Sunspots, and that's up to date through recent and projected into the next cycle. There was, in the early 70s, a distinct, strong correlation with what had been observed over the previous 50, 60, 70 years. And so that connection between, especially Great Plains drought cycles and sunspots were strongly being put forward. And as in about my second year of college, I was advised as follows: don't go into climatology. And interesting, I didn't have time to put this in my slideshow, but as of last fall, the department that I went to that was then called Meteorology and Oceanography, any University of Michigan graduates in this room? A grad? Holy cow, and you admit it. Yes, this is good. People in Michigan are pretty arrogant about that, but around here, not so much. What was I going to say? I was going to say something else. Don't go into climatology. Oh, what did I not put into the presentation? I've already forgotten. That's where I was going, and now I forget. It's not here, so I can't tell you. A whole lot has happened since then. And I do want to know the answer to that question. I don't remember. Population has exploded. The atmosphere has gotten richer in things like carbon dioxide. El Nino and dozens of other atmospheric oscillations have been observed and embraced. Climatology has become much more popular, and people really even invite climatologists to parties now and then. Climatologists do like hanging out with engineers, though, and I do have an engineering degree to go with it, so haha. We have more weather data than ever, which is stuff that we climatologists love, and there, is that on there? Yeah, it shows up, just doesn't show up there. And there are, again, more data than ever, and there's a picture of one of our ag weather stations up in, anybody can spot that place? That would be North Park. That's probably near Cowdrey. And there is our ag weather network, and some of you met Zach Schwalbe, who's our network manager now for the Colorado Ag Meteorological Network that has grown substantially with some thanks to the people in this room. Thank you very much. There's your favorite cycle, El Nino Southern Oscillation, ENSO, and what it's been doing, its ups and downs over the last 65 years, and it's on one of the ups right now, which is why you've heard so much about it for the last year. And then there's all these other oscillations. Those of you that came to the workshop on Wednesday morning, I got to talk about my 20 favorite oscillations. My favorite is still the day-night one. And then there is this oscillation, which is the carbon dioxide cycle in in the atmosphere that also has imposed on it this trend. We'll maybe talk about that later. Methane also has an annual cycle, up, down, but also a trend upwards. So what are we climatologists actually thinking? There we are. Are we thinking? Right then we're thinking, look at the camera, smile. We're thinking, can we keep our data networks that we so rely on, can we keep them going? Every year we do. Every year they come into challenge. The federal networks in particular. More states have put more money into observations. We used to rely on the federal system, not nearly so much at this point in time. The western states more so. The eastern states have very little help from federal government for these things. We ask the question, especially in adjacent states, we ask, will we have another miracle May? What did you think about May? Did you like it, hate it? How did May go for you? A few people would have a different attitude, but mostly it was what? It was plenty of water when you didn't think you were necessarily going to have so much. So we're asking that question again. Will there be another one? There is what May of 2015 looked like in historical perspective compared to previous Mays. It was our wettest ever. It was second wettest month statewide measured based on our data. What was the first wettest month? No, don't look at this one. Oh, yeah. Okay. So there's a vote for September 2013. It wasn't. It was high, but it wasn't. I predict that none of you will know because it was longer ago than any of you in the room were here. It was April of the year 1900 when about another quarter inch more fell on the statewide average than this year. Oh, by the way, I have a quiz question for you. Pertains to last summer. There we go. What was the hottest temperature measured last year at any time during the summer at the weather station out at Denver International Airport? I'm going to close my eyes. I am going to listen to when you give the right answer. Oh, the second person to speak. The 105 was too high. The 98 came from over here somewhere. 98, it was. Do you remember that? And is that an unusually hot temperature for DIA for the summer? No. In fact, nowhere in the state was it unusually hot on any given day. And yet, this past summer, with all the moisture we had, it was still warmer than average. Most of it was nighttime warmth with the high humidity and not daytime warmth. It was really a comfortable summer for most of us. Did we have water in the rivers? There's our favorite Fort Collins Cache la Poudre at Canyon Mouth. That's a pretty good flow year compared to the average line. There's the South Platte at Kersey. Do you think that's some water? How many peaks up there around or above flood stage are you looking at? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Holy cow, that's a lot of peaks. There's the Arkansas. Did you take a little water down there? You didn't? There was a lot of water in the Ark. And the Colorado River, not so much, but yet much more than was anticipated. We were thinking we were going to have a total dud year, and it came on long and strong and ended up above average a bit on the annual flow. Not much, but a little. And our reservoirs, as we go through the season, you're looking there from 1997 to the end of the 2015 water year, and the 100% means statewide reservoirs at average. And you'll see that we had climbed back for the first time since 1999 to above average by several percent, actually more than 110%. Thank you, John Martin, for putting a lot of water in that reservoir. So where are we now? Climatologists especially Western climatologists, our bread and butter, or why we keep our jobs when we don't do a good job of prediction, is keeping track of drought. And here's what the Western drought the U.S. drought situation looks like right now. And it is in fact retreating. Even in California, it's retreated a bit. They still have some very empty reservoirs, but the snowpack is building. It's looking optimistic. And what do you see in Colorado? Almost nothing. All there is a little bit of abnormally dry, which really is no big deal. Abnormally dry is something we see like 1 out of every 3 years. So this is a wonderful map for most of the country, and except for California, eastern, southern Oregon, and Nevada. And they are also making progress. So climatologists are feeling good, but whenever we see, this is a time series of percent of Colorado in drought of D1, which is moderate drought or greater, since they began the process, which was back in 1999. And I argue with what I see there, because I think there was more drought in 2000 and 2001, but they were just learning how to do it, and we weren't participating at that point. You see 100% of the state in drought, 2000 and parts of 2000, or 2002, parts of 2003, continuing widespread in 2004, finally getting better in 5, getting worse in 6, getting better, almost gone at the end of 2007, then easing back in a little bit in 2008, then finally erased in late 2009, only to come back big time 2011, 2012, and now, you know what? We have been drought-free statewide for longer than we normally ever go without drought. What does that tell you? In the great world of oscillations, I would say we're going to oscillate towards dry sooner than later, but maybe not yet. There is where the snowpack is in the U.S., and it's the blues are the good, and whatever colors we are in Colorado are pretty good. And there's I'll talk about that in a minute. Wyoming and eastern Montana are really the only trouble spots right now. And now we have to talk about things like this. The climatologists think El Nino. Why? Because it is, of all the cycles we look at, it's the cycle that has the most bearing on what's going to happen next over the largest portion of the globe, especially when El Nino is either very strong, warm, or very cold, cold. In between, not so much. But there, if you look at that 1950 to 2015 pattern, you'll see that the blue periods are periods when Colorado has tended to be drier, and the red periods are periods when we have tended to be wetter. And we are in a red period right now, and it's not necessarily quite as dramatic as 2000 or 1997-8 or 1982-83, but still impressive and possibly ongoing. Most likely, El Niños don't last that long. It is an oscillation, it is a cycle. It should be coming down soon, but the longer it stays in the warm phase, the more likely we'll get one more wet spring, maybe. There's the February outlook, not counting the outlook for this weekend and early in the next week, which, by the way, next week is February. You all celebrate February 2nd, right? Just an aside. The 3-month outlook, temperature on the left, precipitation on the right, that would be February, March, April. We're in between on temperatures. We're very much on the wet side for precipitation. Go later into the spring. Still in between on temperatures, warm across the northern tier, cool in the south. But Colorado's still in the wet. And then guess what we can expect for this summer? What do you think? That would be a big who knows forecast. And why? Because El Nino fades, all the other indices that we follow are sort of conflicting, and furthermore, summer prediction of precipitation is always difficult. If you have had a wet spring and the ground is moist, you will tend to recycle some of that moisture, especially on the eastern plains and the higher elevations of the mountains, in the form of afternoon thunderstorms that will keep you wetter for a few more weeks until you finally dry out later in the summer. And we did dry out last summer, late, September in particular, which was another summer month. And then what do you do with this sort of information? I'm teeing up Taryn. Global annual temperature anomalies. Red are warm, blue are cool. That would be 1880 to 2015. 2015, globally a warm one, warmest as measured. What about U.S. average nationwide temperatures? Not quite as warm as 2012, but yet really warm. And interestingly, Colorado, which doesn't have to follow the global patterns, sort of does. And for us, it was our third warmest year on record, even though the summer was really quite pleasant. Not as warm as 2012, not as warm as 1934, nevertheless warm. So if you're wondering what to do with the information you have just been presented with, I have a suggestion. Aha! If you're not sure what to do, get your rain gauge ready. In fact, get it. Some of you have rain gauges right now sitting in your garage. Some of you have broken ones on posts. Some of you have promised me rainfall data and you have not come through for me. Some of you have never thought about it, but today you will think about it. Get a rain gauge. Join our fun, and it is fun. Volunteers with rain gauges can do amazing things and surprisingly useful. CocoRoz.org, please do us that favor. That was last weekend's, well, this is the big snowstorm from whenever it was. It was not that long ago, was it? The big East Coast snowstorm. With the help of volunteers like you. These were one day of last year's spring rains with the help of volunteers. How many of you have a dot on that map from May the 6th of 2015? Raise your hand. Oh, there's a hand. There's another hand. There's a hand. Oh, yes. See, it's not so hard. These people could do it. You, too, can read a rain gauge. You don't have to buy a $7,000 rain gauge or an automated station. So enjoy today, because it's still pretty warm outside, yes? And get ready for, just watch this. This was 2003. Some would say it could happen again this spring. Maybe not a good time to use that Weber. Would you now know that it was a Weber? That was a big one. That was March 2003. No Weber. Finally, the storm lets up. Thank you very much. I think I'm done. Yes, I am done.